Happy New Year! It's Wednesday and it's 2024, and we are back into the book of James. I'd like to start as we always have, even though it's a new year, we're going to start the same old way with some time in prayer requests and sharing some things. I'd like to ask you to be in prayer for the family of Colleen Robinson. Her and her husband Tommy were founding members of our congregation. They have been very instrumental in making our church family what it is today, with lots of different areas of help. Things that Tommy did before we moved here to Reedland. We had a congregation that was down on the Broadway. We were known as the Broadway Christian Church, and Tommy's job was to come to stoke the old boiler, to get it going and to have those radiators pinging and popping so that in the winter months back in the 60s and the 70s, that that building would be warm when people showed up for church and that they could have church service. Colleen passed away this past week. She went to be with her Lord. She was 93 years old. Tommy had already went on, and she is now reunited with him, but more importantly, reunited with her Savior, Jesus Christ. So I'd ask you, if you would, to be in prayer for her daughter and son, all of the grandchildren. She was a wonderful Christian lady, was just very kind and loving to me over the years. I took great comfort and encouragement from both her and Tommy's roles in my life. So if you would, pray for Colleen, pray for her family. If you would, keep Ann Wright in your prayers. She is really struggling with the recovery after her knee surgery. Again, they cleaned it out. She's been on the antibiotics, the IV stuff, all of the therapy that goes along with it. She needs our prayers for strength, for recovery, just to get to feeling better and to get back on her feet. I know also just prayers to perk her up. It's easy to get down when you're not able to do much. So if you would, pray for Ann. We love her and we miss her at church and hope that she's doing well. Also want to ask you to pray for Ken and Nancy Seegers. They had a wonderful Christmas, got to see the grandkids and the great-grandkids, got to spend time with the son and daughter-in-law. And I believe that Ken's doctor's appointment with his neurologist is this week. It's coming up. So if you would pray for that doctor's appointment, pray for some answers that they can figure out what's going on and they can possibly move forward in what's going to be the next best step for everybody involved there. So especially be praying for Darren and for Kim as they've got to make those decisions based on what they hear from the doctor. Trying to think if we have anybody else that I can think of. I know that we've had some folks that have been sick and not feeling well. We've had a few families that have experienced loss over the year, and this time of the year, the holiday season, it makes it difficult. So I remember them. If you've got something that you'd like to share, if you want to remind me of something that I'm forgetting, and I apologize if I'm leaving anything big out, drop it in the comments section down there and the bottom of this video. You can email me at reedlandchristian@gmail.com. I'd love to pray alongside of you. So we'll have a quick time of prayer. If you want to pause it, open with some prayer. And then we're going to get into the book of James. James chapter 3, verses 17 through the end of the chapter. I was able to go and to visit one of my friends who is preaching at the church, the last church I was youth minister at, and I enjoyed myself greatly on Sunday morning. Joe Dreblow was here and did a wonderful job preaching the gospel to our church, and I got to hear my brother preach on James, which was interesting because I was jumping back in it, and it reminded me of all the things that we had talked about and will talk about. But one of the things that he really brought about was that James can be so blunt and so straightforward that when you hear some kind and encouraging or positive, affirming type language, it's striking. And I like that James is so succinct, so direct. If we need a tap on the shoulder to be reminded, hey, maybe don't do those things that you're not supposed to, that's a good thing. Other times we might need what my grandpa used to always call a swift kick in the pants. And that's a little bit more than a tap on the shoulder. That is something that, like, hey, stop it. We need to do better. We need to do what God desires us to do. And all of those are good things. They're needed. And yet when James uses some flowery or encouraging type words, it's such a contrast, but it's a wonderful contrast. It really makes us pause, certainly myself, and think, man, what's he trying to say here? So I'd like us to finish out James chapter 3, starting at verse 17. And he's been talking about the tongue, talking about people that can't control the way that they talk, can't control the way that, the words that come out, can't control the attitudes and the emotions and the way they conduct themselves. And he's basically come to the conclusion that if we are wise, then we ought to be able to, kind of put the kibosh on not exploding. So then he says, wisdom, if you want to know what wisdom from above looks like specifically, he describes this. And we talked a little bit about this last time where we were getting into talking about this in our last meeting, but that was a couple weeks ago. That was last year. So we ought to refresh our memory here. Verse 17, James chapter 3. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It's peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And then he reminds us in verse 18, he says, peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. I don't really do New Year's resolutions anymore. I have, for health reasons, been working out somewhere between 3 and 4 times a week for the last year and a half, and I feel incredibly better. I have lost a little bit of weight. I've noticed that I may have gained a little bit of weight back, but my pants fit better. My shirts are a little tight in the belly area, but it is what it is. I'm not making any New Year's resolutions. I don't begrudge anybody that does. I think it's good for us to set goals and to kind of say, this is what I would like to see in the next little bit. But what I have come across is this verse and the desire in the new year to not let my tongue get myself in trouble, to not say something or react in a negative way, but to look at this and to say, okay, I want to be wise. And I want my wisdom not to be of the world's standing and what the world says is going to be right, but I want what God says to be dictating the way that I'm wise in my life. So if that's the case, I want to be wise from heaven. James says wisdom that comes from heaven is pure. It's peace-loving, considerate, submissive to God, not to our desires, not to others around us that like, oh, well, if that's what you want, and that's what you think is right, then you do your own thing. It is submissive to God. What can I do to you? What can I do for you, Lord, today? How can I please you? How can I be a blessing? How can I follow the commands that you have given? How can I sow some peace? How can I be considerate of others and considerate of your word? How can I be full of mercy? How can my life bear good fruit? How can I be impartial, not judging and saying, well, I feel this way, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, or I think this is better, so I'm going to do that. How can I pray? And how can I do all of that with sincerity? With a sincere heart, say, Lord, I need you to be at the center of it. It comes from peace, peacemakers. That doesn't come, that discernment, that wisdom from above, it doesn't come on a snap decision where you think, I think this is best. It comes from dealing in difficult moments, taking a deep breath, not just jumping to conclusions, not saying the first thing that comes to our mind, not reacting in emotion, oh boy, that drives me up a wall. But just saying, okay, what do we need to do here, Lord? How do you desire me to move forward? And then he says in verse 18, peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. And then he starts to ask some questions, and that's what chapter 4 will begin with. And we'll go over these a little more in depth next week. But if we are to ask ourselves, Lord, what can I do to submit to your will? How can I be a peacemaker? How can I receive a harvest of righteousness? It has to come from peace, and that only comes from God. So when James asks questions like, well, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but you don't get it. You kill, you steal, you covet, but you can't have what you want. Oh boy, we've went from the very kind and loving and the feel-good type things up here back to the, hey, your tongue is set on fire by hell itself. James is back to the gut punch, not the kind little tap on the shoulder or the pat on the back or the warm embrace. But we need that. So how do we have peace? How do we do the things that will lead to a harvest of righteousness? Well, very simply, it comes from consulting God. Not saying to ourselves, man, what do I want? How would I handle this? What am I going to do about this? But saying, Lord, what do you desire? What do you want? How can I be a blessing for your kingdom? How can I bless your name by the way I live my life? And if we ever decide that it's all about us and what we want, and then we'll get into what James says about that at the beginning of next week. So my challenge to you in this brand new year and in our first time together, our first Wednesday of the year together, is ask God for wisdom. Actively ask him for purity, for peace, to be considerate of others and considerate of his will. How can I be a blessing to others? Not what can I do to make them happy in the moment, or what do they think is right and I'm going to do that, but what can I do to show Jesus to these people? What can I do to be a blessing in the name of God to this group or to this individual? How can I be sincere? How can I bear good fruit and show mercy? If you're asking God to help you do those things, and that's how you're starting this year out, it's going to be good. But if it's all about you, you're doing what you want, then what we're going to see next week, it don't end well. It's not good. But God's got this. He knows what you need. Now let him help you get to that point. Let him walk with you. In fact, rather than saying, well, God's my co-pilot, I've been driving this bus for I don't know how long and everything's going well and I just ask God where we're going and he tells me and I steer the wheel and I push the gas and I got all this together. Why don't you say, I'm God's co-pilot? In fact, I'm just along for the ride. God is the leader and I am being submissive to his will. I'm seeing where he leads me. He is my shepherd, and because he takes care of me, I don't have anything that I need. That sound familiar? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I think we'd be better off if we do that. Let's seek wisdom from above, as James commands us to do. And to do that from a perspective of how can I seek God out and what can he show me to do each and every day. And if we start the year out like that, it's going to be a good year. Even if we're off schedule. Even if we're out of sorts, even if things aren't going the way that we want them to. And I know for many of us, it's been that way. The year starts out like that because the kids aren't in school. The things don't work. Our printer at the office is broken down. We've got all kinds of things that aren't the way that they used to be. You notice that I don't have my notes that I know I normally print those out. I'm just reading the Bible. But you know what? Maybe it's good for us to get back to me and Scripture, and that's all I need. Me and the Lord. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to wait and listen to what he says, and then I'm going to do what he is leading me to do. If that's how we can work together and how we can work for God's glory in the new year, then I think we're going to do pretty well. So with that being said, why don't we all try to do that? Seek God out, see what he says, and then follow him as he leads us. If we can do that, it's going to be a good year. I hope it's a good year for us. We'll see you next week. God bless you.